Welcome to Drive the Daf, clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Taanis Daf Gimel begins by a continued discussion of the opinions of Tanaim as to when we say Mashav Merid Hageshem. We had seen 4 opinions on the subject. The Gemara is going to continue giving the sources of the opinions and perhaps what they argue about. And the Gemara will show which Tana certain Mishnah fits with. The Gemara will then go into discussions of the different types of weather, the dew, the rain, the clouds, and the wind, which ones are good, which ones are bad, which ones stop, which ones don't stop, which ones you're allowed to or have to be mispalel for, and which ones you do not, and different types of each when they are beneficial to which types of crops. So let's begin. So we've seen a discussion of Nisach Hamayim. Nisach Hamayim is the water that's poured on the Mizbeach on Sukkot. We've seen that there are 2 potential sources to the halacha of Nisach Hamayim. One which we've seen already in our last daf is that it's learned from the extra Mem, Yud, Mem in the Karbanos of Sukkot that are in the word Unsacheha, Uniskehem, or Kamishpatam. There's an extra Mem, Yud, Mem on the carbon of the 2nd day, on the 4th day, and on the 6th day. So, according to some sources, which we have seen already, that is the source that you have a pouring of water on the Mizbeach, and that remez is from the 2nd day. It starts on the 2nd day and it ends on the 6th day. That is the source of 2 of the opinions as to when you say Mashav, or as to when you begin saying Mashav Merid Hageshem. And those are the opinions of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, who says you start on the 2nd day of Sukkot, and Rabbi Kiva says you start on the 6th day of Sukkot. Now, there were 2 other opinions there, and that's Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Elazar says you start on the 1st day of Sukkot, and Rabbi Yeshua says you start on the last day, meaning Shmini Atzeres. Now, the Gemara gives another source, another brisa, which brings a source for the halacha that you do Nisach Hamayim. And that's from the fact that the Torah says, in the Parsha Rish Chodesh, it says, Ba'kodesh hasech nesech sheichal Hashem. So hasech, nesech, refers to 2 types of pouring on the Mizbeach. One is wine, one is water. The Gemara says, how do you know one is wine, one is water? Maybe they're both wine. The Gemara says, if they be both wine, then you should say hasech, hasech, or nesech, nesech. The fact that you use different words shows that they're different pourings, and therefore one is referring to wine and one is referring to water. Okay, now the Gemara wants to know, so we've seen these 4 opinions. The Gemara is assuming that the source of when we start saying Mashav Merid Hageshem is connected to when you say, is to when the Nisach Hamayim begins. So the Gemara says, who fits in this Mishnah that says that you do Nisach Hamayim, you pour water on the Mizbeach, all 7 days of Sukkot. Now Rashi points out it could definitely be Rabbi Eliezer, because Rabbi Eliezer says you pour water on the Mizbeach. Rabbi Eliezer says you start saying Mashav Merid Hageshem on the 1st day of Sukkot, and therefore you could pour water all the days of Sukkot. He obviously is not bothered by saying Mashav Merid Hageshem on Sukkot, even though you don't want rain. So Rashi says the Gemara is looking for which of the other 3 opinions could it fit with. So Gemara says it would seemingly not be able to fit with Rabbi Shua, who says that you only start saying Mashav Merid Hageshem on the Shmini Atzeres, then you should only have 1 day of Nisach Hamayim, not 7 days like this Mishnah says. It shouldn't be Rabbi Akiva. He says you start on the 6th day, you should only have 2 days, 6th and the 7th, not 7 days like this Mishnah says. And it shouldn't be Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira either, who says you start on the 2nd day, you should only have 6 days of pouring the water of Nisach Hamayim. You should not have 7 days like this Mishnah says. So the Gemara wants to say, well, maybe the Mishnah fits with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says you start on the 2nd day, maybe he holds it go all the way to the 8th day. The Gemara quotes the Mishnah that says that there was Nisach Hamayim for 8 days, all 8 days. So that Mishnah says that you did Nisach Hamayim even on Shmini Atzeres. So maybe Rabbi Yehuda also agrees you did Nisach Hamayim on Shmini Atzeres. So he says you start on the 6th day and you end on the 8th day. So that's why you have 7 days, and therefore he could fit in the Mishnah that says you have 7 days. The Gemara says he can't, because the reason he says you start on the 2nd day is because the hint to Nisach Hamayim comes from the word Mayim, spelled out by the extra letters in the Karbanos of Sukkot. That remez starts with the extra letter on the 2nd day of Sukkot, and it ends with the extra letter on the 6th day of Sukkot. You should not, therefore, continue all the way to Shmini Atzeres. So it would not make sense that you should go past the last day that you have that remez. And therefore, you shouldn't do more Nisach Hamayim than that, and therefore, you wouldn't be the author of this Mishnah that says you have 7 days of Nisach Hamayim. So the Gemara says no, but the author could be not only Rabbi Elazar, it could also be Rabbi Yeshua. because Rabbi Yeshua, who says that you start saying Mashav Ruach U'Mar Geshem Hashmini Atzeres, could potentially hold that there is no connection between Nisach HaMayim and when you say Mashav Ruach U'Mar Geshem. He called that Nisach HaMayim is not learned out from these sources. It has nothing to do with the sources. Nisach HaMayim is just a halach al-Moshe Misinai that you're supposed to do Nisach HaMayim. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira and Rabbi Kiva, you can't say that because they say you start Mashav Ruach U'Mar Geshem on the second. On the sixth day, they have to be deriving it from the Nisach HaMayim and have to be holding that it starts on those days as well. But according to Rabbi Shua, it could be not connected. It's a brisa that also seems to show that halacha of Nisach HaMayim is not connected to this limud from the psukim. The Gemara says that it's brisa. Rav Ami brought it, Rav Yechon, and Rav Nechunya, Ish Bekas B'Schorson, that there are three halachas, halacha Moshe Misinai. That was the halachas of 10 trees in a field spread out, allow you to plow the field before Shemitah, 30 days before Shemitah, which would otherwise be forbidden. The halacha of how you take the arava on Hoshana Rabbah, and the halacha of Nisach HaMayim, which is what we're discussing here. Those are all halacha Moshe Misinai. Okay. The Gemara now goes on to discuss the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda, so we've seen him quoted in our Mishnah, also quoted in the most recent brisa that listed the 4 opinions. Rabbi Yehuda says, you start saying Mashav Ruach U'Mar Geshem at Musaf of Shmini Atzeres. The Gemara says, where does he get that halacha from? The brisa says, he says it in the name of Rabbi Yeshua. The Gemara says, name of Rabbi Yeshua? Who is this Rabbi Yeshua that he's quoting? Rabbi Yeshua that we have in our Mishnah doesn't say that you start with Musaf. He says you start on Shmini Atzeres. That would seem to indicate you start with the beginning of Shmini Atzeres. That would be either Ma'ariv of Shmini Atzeres or Shachas of Shmini Atzeres. Now the Gemara says there's another brisa that says over Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and there he quotes Ben Beseira. So Rabbi Yehuda is quoting Ben Beseira. Who's this Ben Beseira? We only know Rabbi Yehuda Ben Beseira, and he says that you start on the second day, not that you start on the 8th day. So who exactly is this Rabbi Yeshua? Who is this Ben Beseira that he's quoting? Now there's one other Rabbi Yeshua out there, and that's in the brisa, but he seems to be the same Rabbi Yeshua as we have in the Mishnah. He says that you start when you put the lulav down, when you stop taking the lulav. That when you take the lulav the last time on Hoshana Rabbah. So when you put the lulav down, it would seem to indicate you start at Ma'ariv of Shmini Atzeres. So either way, who is this Rabbi Yehuda who's quoting? Who's he quoting? Who's the Rabbi Yeshua he's quoting? Who's this Ben Beseira he's quoting? So the Gemara says, simple, he's quoting somebody by the name of Yeshua Ben Beseira. And he holds that way. He holds you start from Musaf on Shmini Atzeres. And in some Mishnayos he's called Rabbi Yeshua, and in some Mishnayos he's called Ben Beseira. And the reason is because before he got Smicha, he was called Ben Beseira. He was called by his father's name. And after he got Smicha, he was called Rabbi Yeshua. Okay, so that's who the source is. Now the Gemara goes into a discussion of the dew and the wind. So the Gemara says, we've been mentioning a praise of Kadosh Baruch Hu, that he brings rain. You do not have to mention anything about the dew and the wind. And the Chachamim did not say that you should. You could if you want to, but they didn't say that you should. And the reason is because they never stop. The dew and the wind are always brought. You don't have to say special tefillah in order to encourage them to come. HaKadosh Baruch Hu never stops it. Someone says, okay, what is the source that the dew never stops? So what is the source that the wind never stops? Both of these are necessary for the world to run. You need a constant supply of water to some extent, and that's brought by the dew. And you need the wind, Rashi says, in order to dry out the world when it needs to be dried and to cool the hot parts of the world. So the Gemara says, okay, so what's the source? So the Gemara says, well, the source that the dew never stops is from when Eliyahu Hanavi was telling the wicked king Achav that there is going to be a famine and there will be a drought and there'll be no rain until I say so. So what he said to him was that there's not going to be any more rain or dew except in my word. And then later when he said that now the rain is going to come, he only said that the rain is going to come. He didn't say that the dew is going to come. So why did he say the rain is going to come? He didn't say the dew will come. Because the dew never stopped. Because the dew never stops. Even in the worst drought, the dew never stops. So the Gemara says, well, obvious question. If the dew never stops, well, why did he first tell Achav that the dew is going to stop? It's only going to be by my word. So the Gemara says, because there's different types of dew. There's dew of bracha and dew of klola. There's blessed dew and cursed dew. So the blessed dew stopped. There was cursed dew, however. So the Gemara says, well, then let him say that the dew is going to start again, because the dew of bracha stopped. So let him say that the dew of bracha is now going to restart now that I'm saying the rain and dew can start. The Gemara says, no. Achav wouldn't have taken that lying down, because it was dew the whole time. Achav would have said, listen, you're telling me the dew is going to start. You tell me now it's going to be dew of bracha. I saw dew all along. I don't know what you're talking about. And therefore he didn't bother saying that the dew is going to restart. The Gemara says, okay, so that's a good source that the dew never stops. The Gemara says, what's the source that the wind never stops? So the Gemara quotes the pasuk in Zechariah, Kadosh Baruch Hu is talking to the and he says, Ki ka'arba ruchos hashamayim peirasti eschem. Now that seems to mean that I have spread you out to the 4 ruchos, the 4 winds of the heavens. I've spread you out to all 4 winds. The Gemara says, but it doesn't say to the 4 winds. That would be bit arba ruchos. That means I spread you out in all 4 directions. But it doesn't say that. It says like the 4 winds. So what it means to say is that you are going to be like the 4 winds. Just like the world can't survive without 4 winds, the world can't survive without Klal Yisrael. And therefore you see clearly that the world cannot survive without the winds, and therefore the winds never stop. Says the Gemara, therefore, we have a few things you could say. You could say Mashav Ruach. You could say Merid HaGeshem. Now, Mashav Ruach you could say whenever you want. You could say Mashav Ruach during the summer. It's not a problem because there has to be winds during the summer. You could stop saying Mashav Ruach during the winter. Also not a problem because there's going to be winds anyway. Even if you say Hashem stops the wind, it's not true. It's baloney. Hashem's not going to stop the wind. You don't have to damage Shmoneh if you say any of those things. Rain, though, you have to say in the right time. If you say Merid HaGeshem during the summer when it's not supposed to be rain, when rain is bad, you got to damage Shmoneh over. That was a bad Shmoneh. If you neglect saying Mashav, if you neglect saying Merid HaGeshem during the winter when we do need the rain, you also have to daven over. That's not the right thing to say. Now, same thing if you say Hashem stops the dew, we're not going to make you say Shmoneh Esrei over because there's nothing that's meaningless. Hashem's not going to stop the dew. Mark quotes a brisa that says that clouds and wind this time, not wind, clouds and wind, you don't have to mention, but if you do mention clouds and wind in your tefillah and your shavach for HaKodesh Baruch Hu, that's great, but you don't have to say it. Again, what's the reason that you don't have to say them? The Gemara says again, because they never stop. Clouds and wind will never stop. There'll always be clouds and always be wind. So Gemara quotes a brisa. Rav Yosef seems to say otherwise. The brisa says, if you look in the pasuk in Shema, it says, "V'otzar es hashomayim, v'lo yiyeh motar." Hashem will stop the skies and there won't be rain. So what does it mean, stop the skies and there won't be rain? It doesn't mean that there won't be... The phrase stop the skies, what does that mean? It doesn't mean there won't be rain, because then it says, V'lo yiyeh motar, says that afterwards. So stop the skies means there won't be wind and there won't be clouds. So that's this brisa. So clearly then, there is possible that there won't be wind and there won't be clouds. So it's a kasha on what we said before, that the wind and clouds will never stop. My answer is 2 types of clouds, 2 types of wind. There's clouds that come before the rain and clouds that come after the rain. The clouds that come after the rain sometimes can stop. You don't always have to have a second set of clouds after the rain is over. Clouds before the rain will always happen, and therefore that's what we're referring to when we say they're never going to stop. As far as wind, there's 2 types of wind. There's strong winds, exceptionally strong winds, and there's regular winds. Regular winds will always be. You don't have to worry about losing those. Strong winds, sometimes they'll be without strong winds for a while, and that's fine because we could survive without strong winds. The world does not need strong winds. The Gemara says, what do you mean? We need strong winds. Strong winds are very helpful for helping to winnow the chaff, the cracked kernels out of the wheat, out of the grain. We want that. So why should we not be mispal for the strong winds? The Gemara says, no. You don't need the winds. You could do it with a sieve or a sifter. There's other ways of doing it. It's fine. You don't have to have it. All right, now the Gemara quotes Ula, name of Rabbi Yehuda, or possibly Rabbi Yehuda, about different types of rain, different types of winds. And he says as follows. The clouds and the wind are almost as good as the rain itself. So the Gemara says clouds and the wind are almost good as the rain itself. What type of clouds are you talking about? What type of winds are you talking about? It sounds like you're saying the clouds and the wind that come after the rain, but that's not necessarily a good thing, because we have a pasuk that says that the wind that comes after the rain seems to be a problem. Like it says, Yitein Hashem es mitar artzecha avik va'afar, and Ula said, and possibly Rabbi Yehuda said, the wind that comes after the rain is a problem because it causes the soil, the dirt, to clump up and cover the crops. And that makes problems. So the says, no, there's 2 types. It depends what kind of rain fell. It's a very strong rain, it's not a problem. It's a very light rain, then it's more of a problem because then it'll cause damage to the crops. Okay, saying further, the Gemara says that wind that comes after the rain is almost as good as the rain itself. Clouds that are after the rain are almost as good as the rain itself. Sun that comes after the rain is almost as good as is twice as good as the rain itself. The Gemara says, so he's telling me everything's as good as the rain itself. So what's not good? The Gemara says, what's not good is lightning. Like that's not so good. That doesn't help. And the other thing is when you have partly sunny, partly cloudy patches, the Gemara calls it like the bald patches. That's problematic. You don't want to have that. Okay, quoting further about which weather is good, the Gemara says that Rava says that snow on the mountaintops is 5 times as good as the rain. How do you see that? pasuk in Iyov, Ki lashal gayamer heve aretz v'geshem matar v'geshem mitros uzay. So you see there it mentions snow, lashalig. Then it mentions rain 5 times. It says geshem, matar, geshem, and mitros is plural. So that's 2. So it's a total of 5. So it's as good as 5 rains. Rava says further, snow on the mountains is very good. A rain that's strong is good for the trees. Snow is good for the mountains. Rain is good for the trees. Soft rain is good for fruits. And very gentle rain is good for the seeds. Even for the seeds in the ground, it's good for. Now, the word he uses there is orpila. When it says orpila means seeds of the ground, it comes from a combination of the term urupili, awake those of you that are within the ground.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.